Hi, this is Magda Kay. In today's episode of Psychology for Marketers, I want to talk to you about the fonts. I'm pretty sure that when you were creating your website, you were asking yourself a lot of questions about various elements that have a direct impact on how your pages convert, and one of them was which font to use. So in today's episode, that's exactly the question that we'll be answering together, so that you know which font converts the best and which font you should use for your website. But before we move to the tips that I have for you, let me ask you this question. What is the main goal to look at when choosing a font? Now, yes, the answer is very obvious, and it's to be read. But trust me, so many people seem to forget about it. It is crucial. We have to remember that the main reason of the font is to allow your copy to be read, is to get the message to your prospect. That's why you use the font. So font, it's just the means to the goal. So it's not about how fancy it is. And that's really the mistake that so many people are making. They go for those extremely decorative fonts like handwritten. They're beautiful and they're definitely adding to the design aspect of the pages and the product itself. But the problem with those is that you just can't read them. See, why am I stressing this so much? Is the simple fact that the way that the human eye is created is not really meant to read anything from the screen. It's easy for us to read any printed word, a magazine or a book, but when it comes to reading from a screen, it's much more tiring on our eyes. And despite the new technologies, because it really has advanced, if you think of the old blue screens with white text on it that were horrible, it's really much easier right now, but still, it's not easy. It will always be tiring. This is why you have to keep in mind that the rules that you might be applying for any printed text, these are not the same rules that apply to your websites. On the contrary, following the rules of the offline text on your online pages can actually be the reason why you're not getting the performance of your website as you would like it. So, what we'll be talking about right now are the few very simple tips that guarantee that your font will be readable, or in other words, that your message will get to your prospects. So the first tip is size. Now, yes, this is obvious, and you might be thinking, well, I know the size needs to be appropriate to read it. Now, despite everybody pretty much knowing it, still so many people get it wrong. See, as I just said, the rules of the offline text should not apply to the one online. So, even though usually the books are printed in the font number 12, when it comes to your website, you should look at the font 14 or even 16. Now, it doesn't matter who your target is. I've heard before people saying that, well, yeah, it's okay. I can use 12 because my target, these are young people. They don't need glasses. They can read easily. But see, the truth is that in recent surveys conducted among internet users, a lot of young people complained that they had difficulties reading the text. Don't worry about disrespecting your target or showing that you don't understand them, or the fact that maybe design won't be as pretty as you want it to be, because the main reason is that your text is readable to your prospects. So allow everybody else to go with 12, but you, by using 14 or even 16, you're actually the smart one, and you are allowing your prospects to read it better and read it faster. Now, on top of the size, you of course want to look at the type of the font. And as we said before, it should be readable, not decorative. What I mean here is not that you have to go for the standard fonts. I mean, the range that we have of fonts right now is, without limits. There are so many amazingly beautiful fonts that you can choose from, and I do not want to limit you there. Go ahead, explore, and see what different fonts you can use. What I'm saying here, however, is that sometimes people go for these very fancy fonts and then you really cannot read what it is, or you struggle to read. See, that should never happen. Your prospect should never have to struggle and, read it and kind of assume what's written there just because it's not clear and it's not immediate. Remember, a lot of people just scan through your pages, and if the text is well readable, even just by glancing at the sentence, they will know what's there, they will know the meaning of it. If the font requires your prospect to stop and analyze it to know what's there, you're losing them. You're risking that people will not start reading your page, or even if they start, they might find it very difficult to follow and to read it, and they'll just abandon it. So again, use different fonts, feel free to do it, but remember, never ever sacrifice readability just for the sake of having a pretty font. Now the third tip, how to ensure that your pages are readable, is the color. And again, it's a very simple rule. Just remember, the easiest to read is a very dark font on a light background. Now, it doesn't have to be necessarily black and white. Actually, a lot of people say that these two colors, they might be too strong, and it's better to use something like navy blue or very dark gray instead of black. And for your background, you can use a creamy color instead of white, and all of it is good. Simply what you want to remember is that you want to have a dark font and a light background and not alternate it. Now, having said that, I'm not saying don't use colors. Quite on the contrary, I'd say go for it. But you have to know how to apply it. So what are the rules when using the color? The main power of the color is that it draws attention because it stands out. So think of something that is extremely important within your copy. What are certain words or sentences or even maybe paragraphs or sections that you really want to make sure that people will pay attention to? And if you put them in the color, you can be 100% sure that they will. Now, if you have the dark font on a very light background, you want to go for colors that really stand out. So something like orange or red, maybe light blue. But don't go for something that's very dark, like dark green, for example, because it will not stand out enough. Now, okay, so we just had 3 tips, right? The size, the type, and the color that you want to consider when choosing your font to make sure that people can read it well. Now, I have a bonus here. See, not only can you use a special type of a font and adjust it so that people can read the message that you have for them easily. See, I have 2 more tips for you that will allow you to look at fonts from a different perspective as well. So how can you leverage on the fonts you're using to make sure that you're giving to the prospects not just the right direct message that is written, but also the emotional one? See, whatever product you have, whatever brand you have, there are certain associations related to it. And when you're passing the information to your prospect, you want to make sure that they have the same associations with it as you created it. So the coming 2 tips are about this, how you can make sure that the emotions that go with your product are exactly the emotions that your prospects will read. So the first tip is exactly about the indirect messaging of the font or emotions. Now, the best way for me to illustrate it to you is by giving you an example. So let's start with this page and the word fear. The font is neutral, capital letters, quite big. Now imagine you have a page and on this page you see this word. Very likely it might make you feel some fear. You might feel like, threatened a little bit or scared. So this is the direct meaning of the word. But now look at this. See, by increasing the size, you're making the emotional message much stronger and you make it stand out. So how much fear do you want your prospects to feel? If you really want those emotions to be there, very visible, then make your text bigger. But that's not it. Look how type of the font can change the emotional meaning. See, if I was to read this word, it's always the same indirect meaning, fear. But reading this font, which is, oval and soft, it actually does not make me feel anything close to fear at all. See, when I look at it, this kind of a font reminds me of something positive, maybe a pastry shop or a cafe. So something that has no associations with fear at all. Now look at this example. Another fear. But this font, this is actually a very typical way of writing in creative agencies industry. So I could assume that this is the name of an agency. Again, I would not associate with fear. So see that by changing the type of the font, I can change the meaning of the word. Even though the direct meaning of what is written is one thing, by changing the font, I can change that meaning. Now, the second tip, and that's about positioning. Whenever you sell something, you're thinking, how am I different from competitors? What is unique about me? What are the emotions? What are the benefits? What are the experiences that I am offering? And again, by adjusting the font, you can make this message much clearer. And again, let me illustrate it with the example. Now imagine you want to go to a restaurant with your wife or a husband, and you're searching online through different food lists to trying to decide where to go. So as an example, imagine you have these four, and just by altering the way you write the word menu, you can evoke certain expectations in your prospects. So compare, for example, the second one to the last one. So, the second type, it's looks like written with a marker. So it's something more, I would say, easygoing, more available, more open to young people, more informal. So I am assuming also that the food would be more towards maybe burgers and chips, quite cheap or at least affordable. And the same for atmosphere. It's something very easy, not fancy design, a place where probably everybody would feel very comfortable. Now, comparing it to the last one, this cursive, see, if I saw a menu written in this way, I would immediately assume that this is a fancy restaurant. That means that the prices are high, the food, it's quite unique, and also the environment, probably very elegant. So see, again, just by altering the type of the font that you're using, you can create certain expectations of your product in your prospect's mind. Now, that's extremely powerful, and this is where you want to play with the size and the font that you're using on top of making sure that your font is readable. So again, let me sum up all of the 5 tips that I just shared with you. So the first one, and that's the most important one, that's your priority. This is to remember that your font needs to be readable. And for that, you're using the size, the type of the font, and the color. But then you can play with all of those 3 actually to make sure that not only is your message well readable, but that also the emotional aspects and that indirect messaging is being correct and is being aligned to your brand strategy. Now, this is all for today's episode of Psychology for Marketers. As you see, these tips are very easy, and if you notice that you're doing something opposite to this, I really encourage you to implement those changes and test how it's working for you. And especially when you have the results, I would love for you to share it with the community. See, I believe in learning from each other. So if you have any findings or if you have any other experience, you've already done some testing with the fonts and you know which font converts the best for you, share it with others. And as always, if you have any questions to me, if something is not clear, feel free to put your question in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. So again, this is it in today's episode for Psychology of Marketers, but I'll be back soon with even more tips for you and how you can make your business grow with no effort needed.